Thank you very much, Kate. So my brief when I was asked to present was to talk a little bit about practically how theory of change has been used to frame and structure evaluations. So to do that, I'm going to kind of break my presentation down into a few parts. First of all, telling you a little bit about what we do as an organisation, how we've used theory of change, some general considerations on how you might use a theory of change to go about doing an evaluation. And then if we've got time at the end, some specifics on a project called Pharmaceuticals and Nature that we've been using theory of change to help with evaluation. So next slide, please. Yeah, Natural England is a non-departmental government body, which is sponsored by DEFRA. We've got our kind of our stated purpose, which is there on the screen for you to read, but we often describe what we do as being the government's advisor for the natural environment. In practice, it's a little bit more complicated than that, because on the one hand, we're a governmental advisor, an independent advisor. On the other hand, we are a bit of a delivery body for some of the things that DEFRA does, such as delivering advice to farmers on how to manage their farms in ways that contribute towards biodiversity, limit runoff of chemicals into watercourses, reducing nitrogen that goes into the atmosphere, etc., etc. So we sit somewhere between being an independent scientific body and delivering stuff for DEFRA. We've used theory of change at a number of levels within our organisation. For strategy development, each of the programs, Natural England's work is divided into a series of programs. Each program develops a theory of change, quite a high level, what it wants to achieve. It also has sub-program theories of change, which kind of detail specific work plans, work programs, and then specific projects that it wants to deliver. We've also been using theories of change to kind of understand effectively how well we're delivering various aspects of our work and improving the kind of the quality and efficiency of that, because we're under an imperative, like a lot of parts of government are at the moment, to be more efficient in doing what we're doing. And we've also, and this is kind of where my role comes in, we're using theory of change to structure and frame evaluations. So next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit now about kind of how we've used it to structure evaluations. And I think these are my kind of personal reflections on kind of doing so. I think my first thing I'd like to communicate is that, as I see it, theory of change isn't an evaluation technique per se. Rather, it's a way of kind of understanding better what it is your intervention is trying to achieve. And in so doing, we can kind of more closely identify what it is that we need to measure in order to assess whether it's working. There is, however, a set of evaluation techniques called theory-based evaluations. Lots of you will probably be aware of them and come across them. However, they're also a bit of a family of evaluations. There's a family resemblance running through them. I'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide. But there's not kind of one theory-based family of evaluations. So not one theory-based type of evaluation. I think the other thing that I would reflect on at this stage as well is that not all theories of change will be suitable to support evaluation. And this has been a big kind of challenge that we've had as to communicate across the organisation, that the purpose that you're developing a theory of change for really changes kind of what it looks like, how applicable it is for evaluation, the scale of it, how far it goes along a kind of a causal chain of outcomes and impacts, how much it takes the wider environment of the project or program into account as well. And there's quite an interesting resource on different types of theory of change, which we're including later on. So next slide, please. And talking a little bit about those theory-based approaches to evaluation that I mentioned on the previous slide, there are many options for theory-based approaches to evaluation. In Natural England, we've used contribution analysis, realist evaluation, QCA, process tracing as a variety of those evaluation techniques. Essentially, all of those techniques are ways of demonstrating causation, demonstrating that what we're doing with an intervention is leading to the outcomes that we are measuring. How we go about choosing between those methods really depends upon the nature of the intervention being evaluated. For example, if we're looking at a series of slightly different interventions in slightly different contexts, we might be interested in using realist evaluation, because we want to kind of understand what contexts fires those mechanisms to make it happen. In other instances where we're talking about one case, there's not a variation in interventions across different settings or sites, we've used things like contribution analysis in order to establish those causal claims. Right across this family of evaluation techniques, however, there are some consistent features. They're all an inductive approach. They're testing whether expected impacts from an intervention have happened. They're collecting data at different stages of the theory of change to see whether or not or how far the desired changes have occurred. And they're exploring the causal links at the different levels of the theory of change to test assumptions, confirm or reject the theory that links the different stages of the theory of change. Next slide, please. So this is an example of a theory of change that we developed for a project called Pharmaceuticals and Nature. Pharmaceuticals and Nature is delivered in the Somer Valley in Bath and North East Somerset local authority. It's a green social prescribing project that's been delivered in conjunction with a variety of organisations. So Natural England in conjunction with some green social prescribers. It's also had Wessex Water involved as well in delivering that. The overall kind of objective for the theory for the project has been to reduce the amount of pharmaceuticals entering the wastewater treatment system by referring people who are being prescribed antidepressants to green social prescribing organisations to see if what this is ultimately doing is leading to reduction in pharmaceuticals being prescribed, consumed, and released into the wastewater treatment system. This is a priority for Natural England because we're interested in whether or not these there is this link between green social prescribing and reduced pharmaceuticals, and whether or not this is something that will draw in funding from water companies, because the reduced cost of treating wastewater if pharmaceuticals are reduced. We've built the theory of change around a central pathway. We're particularly interested in measuring these causal connections that we've put coloured circles around. So these are things in terms of whether, I can't quite read it, it's a bit small on my screen, but whether improved well-being for patients, reduces re-referral cycles, prescription, pharmaceutical entering the wastewater treatment system, leading to improved water quality and healthier ecosystems. We've used contribution analysis to conduct the evaluation that is currently ongoing. And we've done that through, because essentially we haven't got the numbers in there for a more statistically informed approach that we might be looking at kind of, and actually I think longer term we want to conduct a bigger study of green social prescribing initiatives to understand whether there is this link between improved mental health, reduced pharmaceutical prescription and water quality. And we're actually looking at kind of quasi-experimental designs off the back of this theory of change, essentially because it's going to be pushing the right buttons in the right parts of decision makers that we want to influence. So interestingly, we're probably in the long term, we're moving towards a kind of a more quasi-experimental design off the back of the theory of change. And I will wrap up there because I realise my time has run out.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you